Adam walked slowly along the shore, the waves lapping at his feet as the sun set over the horizon. He was a paleoclimatologist, a scientist who had dedicated his life to studying the climate past in an attempt to understand the future. But now, as he stared out at the ocean, Adam felt the weight of an overwhelming realization. Islands like the one he stood on, where he had spent years studying, were in danger of disappearing. Rising sea levels, fueled by pollution and the unbridled consumption of natural resources, threatened to submerge entire communities. The thought that humanity was responsible for 85% of this change was a truth he could no longer ignore. Interested in hearing more stories like this and discovering how small gestures can make a big difference? Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming reflections. Yet for Adam, the climate crisis was even more personal. Years earlier, he had worked for one of the world's largest oil companies, unwittingly contributing to the damage he now sought to combat. His job had been to collect climate data, but over time he had become aware of how that information was being used to justify further oil exploration. He left his job with a heavy heart, but he couldn't shake the guilt. That internal conflict tormented him every time he looked at the data. Could he have done something sooner? Now, as the waves lapped at his feet, his soul was overwhelmed by a flood of unanswered questions. As he pondered, he remembered an old Zen saying, "The wind blows, but the mountain stands still." But Adam felt like anything but a mountain. He knew that standing still was no longer enough, that the time for contemplation was over. He had to do more. Have you ever felt stuck like Adam? Tell us about your experience in the comments. Sometimes sharing helps more than you think. The next day, while walking through the crowded streets of Malé, the capital of the Maldives, he met Aisha, a young environmental activist he had heard of before. Aisha had grown up in a family of fishermen who had lived off the sea for generations. But the sea that had once fed her family now threatened to swallow everything up. The waves, growing ever higher and more violent, had already destroyed many homes along the coast, and his family had moved further inland. "Aisha," Adam said, "I see data every day that confirms how much our world is changing, but I feel like it's not enough, that people aren't listening." Aisha nodded. "People only see what they want to see, but we can't wait for them to wake up on their own. We have to act now." Adam was silent. He felt a deep connection to her, but also a sense of shame. His past, his choices, everything seemed to weigh on him. "Aisha, years ago I worked for an oil company. I contributed to this disaster. How can I redeem myself?" Aisha looked at him intently. "Redemption doesn't come from self-pity, Adam. It comes from action. We need to teach people to live in harmony with the planet, and we need to do it now. Here's some practical advice. Start making a difference today. Changing small daily habits can have a big impact. Plant a tree, reduce your use of plastic, or take part in local initiatives to save the planet." Her words rang like a gong in Adam's mind. It was time to act. She returned to her apartment and began working on a project she had long had in mind, an initiative that would combine science and spiritual wisdom to raise awareness about climate change. She reached out to old friends and colleagues, scientists and activists like Aisha, and together they created an online platform, Wisdom for the Future, where they would share stories, data, and ancestral practices to inspire change. The platform grew slowly, but surely. People from all over the world began to contribute, sharing their personal experiences with climate change, sharing ancient wisdom about how to live in balance with nature. But not everyone was in favor. Big companies and governments began to apply pressure, trying to downplay the problem and discredit the project. One night, while Adam and Aisha were working, a cyclone of rare intensity hit Malé. The fury of the wind and waves swept away the city. The streets turned into rivers and the current swept away cars and houses. Adam and Aisha took refuge in a house on a hill, but as they looked out the window, they realized that their shelter would not be enough. The sea was conquering everything. "We can't stay here," Aisha cried. "We have to help people." Adam nodded. He picked up the phone and called his contacts around the world. The Wisdom for the Future platform became a network of aid. Volunteers from all over the planet began raising funds, sending relief supplies, pressuring governments to act. The world was finally paying attention, but at what cost? Climate change is a global challenge, and each of us has a role to play. You can do your part. Share this story to raise awareness and help others understand the urgency of action. The day after the storm, the city was devastated. Adam and Aisha walked through the rubble, meeting people who had lost everything. Yet despite the destruction, there was a sense of solidarity and hope. People were coming together. A local fishing community, Aisha's family, had come together to plant trees along the coast, trying to protect their land from the future. Adam received a letter from a young man in Fiji, an island also threatened by the sea. "I followed your platform," he wrote. "I started planting trees with my community. We may not be able to stop the ocean, but at least I can say I did my part." Reading those words, Adam felt a deep sense of peace. The battle was not yet won, but change was coming, one small step at a time. The real Zen lesson, he thought, was not just in contemplation, but in conscious action. The future depended not on grand heroic gestures, but on small collective actions. Want to discover more concrete ways to make a difference? Join our community and help us create a positive impact on the planet. Don't wait. The change starts now. The project continued to grow, and with it, people's awareness. Adam knew he would never be able to erase his past, but he had found a new purpose, a way to turn guilt into action. Every day he received letters and messages from all over the world. Ordinary people, inspired by their stories, started to plant trees, to reduce their use of plastic, to talk to their governments. And so, as the world around him continued to change, Adam found a new form of serenity, no longer in silent contemplation, but in conscious action. He knew that the future was uncertain, that islands like the Maldives and Fiji could disappear, but he also knew that through science and ancient wisdom, humanity could still find a way. The wind would continue to blow, but now the mountain would move too. Did you like this story? Don't miss the next updates. Subscribe to our channel and continue the journey towards a better future.